Hello, 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 hello. I hope that everybody is doing amazing. So I just wanted to speak to you guys to explain a little bit of a story, right? So I remember in early 2000s when the market crash started, right? So maybe I can help spread a little bit of light. I was not old enough to really know too much about finances, but I did know how to you know, eat a Lunchable pretty well. But I do remember it crashing. I remember my parents speaking. And when I say my parents, I mean my mother and my stepfather. And by mom, I mean blood mom. And my stepdad, who is a POS. But so when I was a kid, I remember huddling around the TV and just watching the news. It was nonstop watching the news, and we would basically be following the stories. And the first thing that happened that I recall, and I could be recalling incorrectly, but from what I remember, it's proven through data and research on Google. And that was the fact that China had some issues going on in their market, right? And I remember the adults all speaking amongst each other, basically explaining how they really didn't feel like the market in the US was going to, see any issues. And everybody was saying, no, 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 the US economy, we're the US, we're the US, all that standard stuff. And me as a child, I had no idea what the hell was going on, but somehow I remarkably remember most of us. And, following that issue in China. I'm pretty sure it was a market crash, but yeah, I feel like it was also Evergrande, but I think there was like Evergrande was like having some issues back in the early 2000s as well. And then something happened in the real estate market, and then the real estate market crashed in China. And then, the US ended up seeing the same thing. I remember sitting around the TV, and it was so funny because everybody was like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And it's like you're saying something so much that it's like you're reassuring yourself that it's not going to happen. And, the early 2000s, you would think that it wouldn't really affect a kid, but it did. And my family, right, we ended up having an issue following after the 2000 crash, the early 2000s crash. And, I remember my mom and my stepdad, they ended up getting their stimulus money. There was stimulus checks going around. That was like the cool thing, a bunch of free money. But, what the government does is whenever a crash is apparent or possible, they like to pump money into the system. And that's to help kind of deter and potentially help people out, but in the long run it doesn't really do anything because you're just creating more debt, right? And even the stimulus money, even though it wasn't necessarily back owed, I'm pretty sure they also had the SBA pumping out money, and there was new debt lines being created, but that's for another day. So after the market crashed in the EOS, my family, we definitely ended up having some issues. My family started to kind of combat it. We didn't really get affected too much, and basically, it was harder because prices had dropped, and we had just purchased a house. And of course, we purchased a house right before the recession. Not really a recession, but a market crash, and definitely. And yeah, that was definitely something else. So equities dropped, quality of life kind of decreased, not drastically, but it definitely decreased. And, how old was I? Wow. Really? I have a hard time believing that. No, I was 12. Okay. Yeah. Let me pull out my calculator. Yeah, so I was about 12, 13. I want to say we had just purchased, I want to say it was maybe in 2007. And it was in the if I'm recalling it correctly, I remember it being very wet outside, and I used to live in the Pacific Northwest, and it was cold outside by the time the market had crashed. So I'm going to assume that we were somewhere between, you know, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Halloween. And, you know, we bought a house, so the equity fell, and there was no pulling out equity after a crash. So if you needed the money and you lost your job, there's no pulling out money. And something that ended up happening is my stepdad, he ended up basically, some stupid thing happened with this company. And I'm pretty sure there was like a mistake or an error or some type of greedy BS. And he lost his company. And it was like a pretty big company. And his part in the company was very, very big. But somehow the company got stolen from him. And, you know, I was very young, so I can't remember all the finer details, but he lost his job. And all of a sudden we had no income. And I'm telling you this story because maybe it can kind of shed some light on what may happen. And from what I remember, and anybody around my age or older is really going to be able to tell you, you know, their own perspective of what happened. And I feel sharing our prior history and stories will really help us be able to prepare for what's to come if the market does crash. Not saying it will, just saying if it does. So we ended up losing all forms of income, and shortly after the crash, we were basically not paying our mortgage. Remember that? I remember being a kid and like having to help my mom figure out how to pay. And I remember her not being able to pay. I remember my stepdad not being able to pay. Our electricity would get shut off all the time, and we wouldn't have anything. The only thing that we really did have was food, because luckily we had government assistance for food, but you know, that was it. So we had nothing, and it just slowly started to spiral down. And I want to say I was 14 when we were finally foreclosed on. And I think that there was like some form of forbearance or something going on, because like my mom did not pay her mortgage for a very long time. And I'm not sure how she kept the house, because she was not paying her mortgage for years. And I think because of what had happened with the crash or something, you know what, I'm actually just gonna go ahead and look it up really quick, because this is driving me up the wall. It's driving me up the wall. Forbearance says 2008. So I'm not too sure. But something happened where basically it just took a really long time for them to get foreclosed on. And by the time that they were getting foreclosed on, you know, that was that. So, you know, we ended up homeless. I ended up homeless. I actually ran away because I couldn't deal with it. I was like 14, but this is just kind of some light, quick little shining of the light of what happened to me after a market crash. And now that I am an adult, I know how to protect myself, right? So what exactly am I going to be doing to prepare for a market crash? Not saying it is going to happen, but I'd rather just kind of be prepared, just because, you know, I'm seeing a lot of repeats right now in history, not necessarily the same, but very, very similar. And, you know, the government getting involved the way that they did now and how they did then is similar. They've done a few additional aspects that they didn't quite do in the early 2000s, but I'm still just going to prepare. So some examples of what you can do if you do lose your job, right, in order to pay for your mortgages, is sell everything you have. I know that's not the nicest thing to say, but you have money laying around everywhere inside your house. And if you go onto eBay, you can find that everything within your house has some form of value. So with if it comes push to shove and you are, struggling, and let's say we're 2 years now, 3 years ahead from right the second, you can use that as a leverage. Definitely reach out to the public resources and churches and really anyone that has some form of following. So like shelters and resources. I think you can call 411 and even ask them for resources for basically assistance. And just basically, if you need to sell everything in your house to keep your house, do it, because you're nothing without a foundation, and your house is your foundation. I don't think many people realize how much you need your home until you lose it. And if you end up having a foreclosure on your credit, it's just going to affect your credit so poorly, and it's going to be hard for you to rent. So it's very important, if you do have, a mortgage on your house and you are faced with those types of issues, if a market crash did happen, that you're aware of what you can do. And selling your stuff is better than selling your house. And if it really comes down to it, instead of being foreclosed on, I recommend selling the house, just because that's how you're going to avoid the hardships that I went through, the issues that I had to go through. And just pinch pennies right now. If you're already having a hard time because of the pandemic, pinch pennies, get assistance as much as you can. Don't make yourself further in debt, because that's just gonna, that's gonna be a downward spiral, because the government's done. They're done. Not done entirely doing whatever BS they're doing now, but they're done in the sense of really, really helping people. Like they did the increase with the SBA again, and I think overall I've seen much more interest elsewhere for them than continuing on and investing it more into us. So pinch your pennies, be smart about your purchases. You don't need to eat out every single night. Just be smart, and you got this. And yeah, so that was my little story on what I went through after the market crash. And I hope that I can help you guys, whether that is soon or maybe 10 years from now, who knows. So best of luck, stay safe, and hug your family a little bit tighter tonight. And yeah, best of luck, you guys. If you need help with anything, call me, text me within reasonable hours, 201-952-4665. And I hope that you guys have an amazing rest of your weekend. Bye. Oh goodness, I can't turn this off. No, I can't. Bye.